Hello and welcome to the Dinosaur Man podcast. I'm Andy Hughes. I'm here with Alex Hudson.
Solid opening, 6 out of 10, I think.
That's what I was going for.
Nothing fancy.
Nothing too good, nothing too bad.
Just knock it around the park, boys.
Absolute middle ground.
Take 5 minutes just to find the rhythm of the game and then just boot it upfield. Defend like your life depends on it.
You know, go for that middle ground.
Do you think enough of our fans are football fans that they will understand that reference? Fine. Spike the ball long, Tom Brady, for a touchdown. Do you know what I mean, guys?
Okay, what are the basketball fans?
Hoops and scoops.
Cool. Hockey fans?
Slapshot. Slapshot.
So hockey, you go straight in for the smash.
Yeah. Well, Tom Brady's throwing it for a touchdown, mate.
What if they are horse riding fans?
Jump over all of those other horses. That's the aim of the game, isn't it? To jump over as many different horses as possible.
That's where that game Horse came from.
But that's basketball, isn't it?
What if...
Well, it was for anything, wasn't it? Because I think even you had a horse thing on Tony Hawk's.
I was about to say, what if our only listener is Tony Hawk's?
Okay, Tony Hawk, if you're listening... Hello? Hang on, only listener. We've lost listeners since last week.
Yeah, and everyone left.
But we've gained one very important one.
Yes.
Will he tweet about us?
Probably.
Does Tony Hawk have Twitter?
Yeah, he's the person who tweets like regularly. He tweets.
Oh my god, he's
people.
at POTUS.
Yes, he's got that account now. He took real Donald Trump now. Because that's up for grabs now, guys.
Is it up for grabs, or is it just bad? Like no one can use it now.
First come, first serve. You get all his old tweets.
Oh, right, you get... Hang on, so you have to take responsibility for his old tweets?
Yeah, because now your face is attached.
There's no... Wait, hang on. Surely my face just morphs into Donald Trump's face.
Let's get in there, bro.
The thing is...
I didn't mean to tell you this, but...
Here's the thing that we need to discuss, right? Mm-hmm. Not many handsome presidents.
Kennedy, wasn't he handsome?
Well, Kennedy was, but also never trust him. Like, he had the face of a man who you shouldn't let be president because you know he's just going to use that power to sleep with women. And he did.
But you trusted Nixon because you're like, that's the face of a president.
Well, he told me he wasn't a crook.
So you had to believe him.
Why would he lie to me?
They called him Honest Nixon, didn't they?
I've never heard any tapes that they've been talking about, but, you know, I'm sure everything's fine.
Apparently there's something about him ordering some kind of, like, you know, water cooler or something, but I'm not quite sure what that's about.
Water cooler? It's water cooler gate, guys.
Yeah, just giving him instructions on how to get it through the presidential gates at the beginning of the White House.
So the gate is like the water. It's the White House gate.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't think that's right.
Who's second most handsome president? Obama, surely.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Good mustache.
He had a good mustache. A good mustache could hide like a multitude of sins back in the day, and I feel like the same cannot be said today because I think now
it's almost
a mustache draws attention to your faults.
But have you seen the pictures of Keanu Reeves when he's got a beard?
Yeah.
Now and Keanu Reeves when he hasn't got a beard.
Yeah.
Like, know how people are like, "Oh, beards age you," and you get like. It ages Keanu Reeves. Like, him being clean-shaven ages him by like 50 years.
Well, look at Bill and Ted. He actually looks like an old man for the first time in decades.
But, like, with his beard, he looks like he's still, like, 40.
Yeah. I mean, he's 39, so that's that's awful.
Oh, no. But, like, I know, like, if I shave, people are like, oh, yeah, you look so much younger.
You do. Yeah.
And then I can't get into the clubs, guys.
Your beard is the only reason that anyone could assume that you are 30.
Oh my god, I'm 30. No, I'm still 29, remember? I cancelled my birthday last year because of, lockdown.
No.
I decided...
That was before... No, yours is in February. You can't have that.
I'm cancelling this one as well. Because of lockdown.
You can have this one this year.
No, it's official, guys. I'm still 29.
No, you've had one birthday... No, you've not had a birthday in lockdown yet. You will, but you haven't.
Yeah, but I was Paulie 66, so I count it, because my Paulie 66 ran into lockdown there.
So are you saying that you were in your own weird personal lockdown?
Exactly.
A social lockdown is not the same as a full lockdown.
Personal lockdown?
Social lockdown is just, you thought it was too much of an effort to go into town on a tram. That's all that happened there. And I'm not having that as your excuse, because in that case, you shouldn't have had about 15 birthdays, because the amount of times you've just been like, it's an effort to do it.
It's nearly time for me to be able to drink legally.
Can't wait to smoke some tobacco.
Welcome to the episode, by the way, guys. This is Dinosaur One Podcast. You'll notice it's not a news and reviews. We thought we'd do something special because, I think releases are still a bit thin on the ground at the moment. But also we said we wanted to try and do some things that were a bit different, but also...
All right, guys, here it is. Here's it. I know you didn't want to do this right now, but I'm going to do it. Your news and reviews? You ain't getting that every week anymore. You can kiss goodbye to news and reviews every week. Oh, it's Sunday. Oh, I need my news and my reviews. Stick it into my veins. Every fortnight.
Maybe. Sometimes it might be weekly.
No, fortnightly. And I don't mean doing the floss. I mean once every 2 weeks. Oh, but what if I need to find out if I can watch Soul on DVD? You can't. It's
already done
Disney Plus. That's already been out. We already talked about that. Where were you when we needed you?
But, like you said, we want to kind of look at do some different things. And
tread carefully, because if you break my promise of once every fortnight.
This week, we thought it would be nice. We've done it before. Of looking back at last year's releases in a way that we don't get to on our roundup of the year. Because sometimes certain films fall through the cracks.
Sure.
And sometimes there's these films that, because we have these films that we recommend, we've got films we don't recommend. There's middle of ground films that are still probably worth watching, but we don't talk about after the point where we watched them. So we thought it might be nice to kind of talk about some of those this week.
What if I also maybe want to talk about one of the films that was in my top 3?
That's fine.
Okay, that's fine.
That's absolutely fine. But,
Oh, Parasite's really good, guys.
Well, for me, I'm not going to talk about 1917, Parasite, or Soul, or anything like that, because I'm like, those are films that I think we talked a lot about a couple of weeks ago. So I'm looking at films that maybe we haven't discussed too much.
Look, guys, I know what you're thinking. And yeah, you're right. It is a cheap ploy to try and get the actual numbered episode ticker up a little bit. Because at this point, we're like 360 episodes deep into this.
Yeah.
And doesn't it feel like it? Doesn't it feel like it, guys? But our numbered episodes, we're still in the, I think, low hundreds. Yeah. 130, 140 maybe? That ain't right.
But also, like...
half of those I wasn't even on before I came here.
If you're like us at the moment and you are locked down...
and
again.
And you know what? I hope to God all of you are. And if one of you... if one single person isn't locked down right now... I want a good excuse as to why. Oh, I'm in New Zealand or Australia. Well, good for you for choosing the right countries to live in.
I saw one of our friends, we went to university with, they had their birthday yesterday, and they're in New Zealand, and it's just them and all their friends, and they're hanging out.
Who is it?
Josh. Do you remember Josh?
He's in New Zealand?
Yeah.
What's he doing there?
He's living the good life, because he's there, and he's with all his friends, and they've all got beers, they've all got loud shirts, and having a great time. And his post was like...
loud shirts?
Yeah.
Hang on, I'm allowed to wear a loud shirt in lockdown. That's not a rule of lockdown.
But the thing is, everyone looked so happy.
Yeah.
And his post was like...
and they're all... they're all naked. They're all having sex.
He's kind of just like...
they're all sharing one Scotch egg.
He's like, sorry that I'm sharing pictures, but this is kind of how my birthday is. And I was like... you're so lucky that you decided to go to New Zealand.
Wow, you were quoting a Britney Spears song at him.
Yes. Oops, I did it again. But, yeah.
Yeah, so I hope you are all locked down.
But what I was going to say is, if you are in a situation like us, a lot of people have been through kind of everything, and they're like, maybe there is something that we talk about today that you might go, oh, that piques my interest, and you can actually go out and see it.
Sure.
Because most of it should be available, I reckon, that we talk about.
Either streaming or on VOD, and if it's on VOD, if it's been out for longer than sort of 6 months, tends to be at a reasonable rate. I mean, even if it's a premium VOD, it's a reasonable rate, I would say. But hey, whatever. Hey, guys, look, we're going to talk about it now. So should we do it?
Yes.
Let's get into things.
Where would you like to start? Because we've got a couple of categories we did discuss beforehand. But
okay, so let's talk about... well, look. Andy and I are never wrong. We never make a mistake. I don't think I've ever been... I don't think I've ever been caught making a mistake.
Yeah.
So that's why this category I cannot call film I was wrong about, because that ain't right. It's film that initially I judged too harshly, and yet I realised my own high expectations for films are to blame. And I am perfect, and so is the films.
Yeah.
But maybe not this film, because it's still not brilliant, but I think maybe it's better than I thought it was. Okay. Fine. Times we were wrong. Oh, God. Film you were wrong on.
Just kind of like, we've done a lot of episodes, and we're not always perfect.
Yeah. And you know what, guys? Sometimes they're skippers. We know it. We know that.
What film did you choose?
I chose Host.
Okay, the
lockdown horror movie, the Zoom horror movie, as it were. Now, Host was an interesting one because that came out on Shudder just like a couple of weeks after I got Shudder. And I only got Shudder really for the Creepshow series, which I think is still good, by the way. I mean, it's not a film, so I'm not going to include it here, but I think it's still look, Creepshow's pretty good. This isn't the time for this.
Well, is there a series you enjoyed this year? Creepshow?
Yeah, I guess so, Creepshow. Mostly. Some of it's a bit silly, but that's kind of in the theme of it. Anyway, Host came out on Shudder in June, July time, I think it was. And then, maybe it was even later than that, I don't even know. But then got released on regular VOD sort of about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
Made loads of people's like top 10 of the year.
I saw this.
And I was like, was I judging it too harshly? And I think these are the parameters that I looked at it from was, have I seen this before? Yes. Unfriended did it. And I think Unfriended is still decent in terms of what it does with that setup. It's very sort of formulaic, and you know sort of what's going to happen. But the idea of that, films like Open Windows and the John Cho film Searching have then gone and done things like that as well. But it's to be commended that they made this during lockdown. Those films, they didn't have those restrictions in place. It wasn't a case of they filmed it out of necessity that way. It was filmed as a sort of gimmick that way.
Yeah.
And the gimmick kind of works to an extent. I think, the less said about Unfriended 2, the better. Jesus, that's a movie, isn't it? But yeah, I think Host is, I don't know, maybe if I go back and rewatch Host, I will find more stuff that I liked about it. But I thought the issue for me was that it felt still very much like Unfriended. And I was kind of going, oh, well, if you did something a bit different to that, then I'd
Am I right saying it was based off a short, like literally like a 2-minute video or something?
Yeah, so it was like a prank that the director pulled.
I saw that on Twitter, and I thought that was good. And I always wondered how it works when you expand that out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not a hugely long film. It's just a case of, I think, because I felt like, oh, I've been there, done that, I've seen this stuff before, that I didn't really I don't think I gave it the credit that it deserved for being able to be produced during lockdown. Because I think that's really the sort of, that's where it falls for me, is that's the most impressive thing about it, is that it was made out of necessity in that way. And it was able to be produced like that. And I think that's probably something that I maybe didn't give it enough credit for on initial viewing. And I was more caught up in the actual, whether it works dramatically for me. And I didn't think it did as much. But I was really shocked when I started seeing it appear on sort of best of year-end lists. Yeah. And these are like, top 10 of the year. And I'm thinking, really? And it's got to the point where I'm thinking, well, I'm probably going to have to just revisit it. It's not a massively long film, so it's not like it's going to... But I wonder if on a rewatch I will appreciate it more for the sense that... Because what it felt like, and what it probably still feels like, is a sort of more ready-made... no, not ready-made, rough around the edges version of Unfriended. Because I think Unfriended itself is kind of still... It's clearly obvious that this is a movie made by a studio and made for that purpose, whereas Host definitely felt more like an amateur film, like, an independent feature that just so happened to get a pretty wide release due to Shudder picking it up. And I think, I'll speak just now for the last time last year, for the last time about this. I think Shudder is a really great service, particularly for people who, obviously if you have an interest in horror, that's why you get it. But I think for being able to promote things like this whilst also hosting a bunch of sort of classic horror movies and stuff that you just wouldn't necessarily see anywhere else, I think it's a pretty good service. And I think, there's a lot of I appreciate there's a lot of these sort of specialist services now, and horror's great because it means that Netflix's horror selection is usually pretty awful.
Yeah.
Particularly in the UK, I think it's much better in the US. The times that I've used it over there, but over here it is very much sort of it's a lot of Stephen King adaptations that Netflix have done. There's a bunch of Mike Flanagan things, and then it's just like I think there was at one point where they had all of the Friday the 13th movies, apart from the first one. Weirdly, they never had the first one. But it kind of feels like you're sort of put in a situation where you don't have a great variety there, and Shudder is something where at least they give you a really wide range of stuff, and I think that's got to be applauded. And I think if you are sitting on the fence about it, I'm sure they offer a free trial for a month still. Try it out, because it's that's what I did, and I stuck with it, and I think it's worthwhile. I think it's really it is the Netflix of horror for a reason. I think it gets the job done. Anyway, you were saying, do you think and I don't know how true this statement is that the reason things like Shudder and stuff work is because horror on a budget has to be more inventive and can produce some things that are real gems. Yeah, definitely.
While some of the other genres that there are struggle when their budget is kind of stripped away.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at sort of budget horror movies, so I talked about The Wretched this year, which I thought was really good and was made for fucking peanuts, really, in comparison to anything else. And it doesn't necessarily revolutionize anything, and it doesn't do anything that you haven't really seen before, but the fact it's able to do it on that budget is still impressive. The fact that, what's that film? Was it Summer of 85 or Summer of 84? One of them is another film that came out this year, but one of them is a film that came out 2 years ago that does a really good job of being this sort of retro-feeling coming-of-age movie that just so happens to have a sort of serial killer in it.
Yeah. And
I think it's a genre that's able to embrace that kind of thing and really make it work. Whereas, you're right, I mean, if a studio comedy then loses its studio and they pull the funding and they still tried to make that movie, does a sort of big studio road trip comedy is it able to do the same thing it was trying to do if you take away $20 million? Probably not. Whereas if you make a movie in the horror genre for $5 million or less, as Blumhouse have routinely showed, you can do some really interesting things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Host is a good example of just circumstances forcing our hand on that. And maybe, I'll rewatch it and I'll see what we think. Maybe I'll just cover it again, or, people just presume that I liked it more the second time round. But yeah, Host is my choice for Time I Was Wrong.
Mine's kind of similar in a sense of, I think I judged it harshly because I've seen so many examples of this kind of film.
Sure.
Which is The Old Guard. Mm-hmm. So Old Guard is a film that I judged, I think I was pretty down on because of the fact that I wanted it to be better.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be something more than it was. But actually, the pieces that are there is stuff to enjoy. Thinking back, and it's a film that I've been thinking about quite a lot this show, and I've been like, actually, the thing I didn't like is the fact that the action that they show I enjoyed, but they didn't show it well enough.
Yeah.
And that's my problem. But actually, the stuff that's there is enjoyable. I think, it's got a good cast of characters in there. Mm-hmm. It has good portrayals of these people in there. And actually, is it because I've seen so many action films that are around this?
Yeah, I think the problem with I saw The Old Guard as well. It's very much more in your wheelhouse than mine. But the problem always comes down to not every film can be John Wick.
Yeah.
And I appreciate this was not necessarily trying to be John Wick in the same way, because the story was much more sort of involved in the lore of this sort of eternal bunch of soldiers or whatever.
You can just keep going.
But I think the problem always comes down to, if you're looking at, say, the John Wick franchise as a franchise and saying, okay, well, that's sort of the standout franchise of the last decade from the action movie genre. Well, what franchise holds a candle to, if you're then getting the first installment in a franchise, what film is going to do what John Wick did?
True.
None, probably.
Well, the interesting thing is, like,
and we've seen it happen again and again recently.
This sat in my bottom third of my list, and it was next to films like Project Power. And I don't think this is anywhere near that kind of film.
No,
I think it's much better than that. And I think, while it's not kind of like, oh, this should be like in the top tier of action films, and I don't think it's maybe as good as, say, Extraction that came out last year.
Right.
But it was still massively down the list for me of where Extraction was. But I'm like, it's not that bad, really. I think there are some really nice moments in there, and I think actually, could it have been done better? Probably.
Yeah.
But is there still enough to enjoy, especially when you're looking at all of the terrible action films that come out in the same year?
Yeah.
Should we actually be like, oh, this has stuff in there that a lot of actions don't? There are characters in there that are interesting.
Yeah.
There's the story of Charlize Theron's character.
Yeah.
And her relationship and her kind of lost lover, so to speak.
Yeah.
You've got two guys in there who basically, somebody's like, you won't ever feel the love I've had for this guy.
Yes.
Because we've been for millennia, and this is a bond you can't break. And I love the fact that that's something that was in the original book, that the guy who wrote it to me said, you cannot remove that moment, because it's kind of the heart and soul. Like, there's these elements to it that I think really work. And I'm like, maybe I have just been too down on it throughout this year. And I don't think it's, like Host, where it's like, oh, actually, this is in like top end of the year lists.
Yeah.
But it is one of those films I'm like, maybe I have, because it is a film that does fit into my kind of...
Maybe it's more of a 3.5 star than a 2 or 1.5 star.
Absolutely. Another film that I think we should mention, by the way, because we reviewed it quite harshly.
Yeah.
And end up in a lot of end-of-year lists of people's favourite films.
Yeah.
Is Queen and Slim. Because I know we didn't.
Okay, so I thought about this while I was scrolling through my letterbox thing, and I was looking at it. I was going, did I judge that harshly? But I still don't think I did.
I still don't see it. But then again,
I don't see what everyone else sees with it. But you're right; it's also cropped up in a lot of sort of year-end best lists, and I think, look, it's probably fine. I will never know, because I don't think I want to go back and revisit it. Did it feel long?
Yes.
Was it actually long?
Who knows?
I'm gonna see if I can find out.
Interesting to me.
All I remember is that you went for a wee, maybe 2 minutes before the end of the film, and I was like, surely he knows that this is wrapping up, because it's coming to this very crucial bit, and then you get back and you're like, yeah, I just couldn't hold it in.
I needed a wee, guys. It's not like, when we watched Rise of Skywalker and I went to the loo purely just so I had minutes out of that screen.
Well, Rise of Skywalker, I saw you drinking everyone else on the row's Cokes. Just so you needed to go for a wee.
It's like, I can't go unless I actually need one.
2 hours, 12 minutes. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, it's a bit long.
I think the thing is, I think Daniel Kaluuya's performance in it is very good, I think. And I feel like... I don't know. I don't think it's enough to save the film, because I just found the film to be... I didn't know whether it was a comedy or not, because there were these weird moments where I was like, is it playing it for laughs and trying to make out that this is actually quite a funny situation to be in? Or is this is it a hard-hitting social commentary? Or is it this weird sort of Bonnie and Clyde love story? And I think the answer is, it's kind of none of those things and all of those things at once. And I think that's probably the reason I just couldn't connect with it, because I couldn't work out what I was supposed to be feeling at any one point. And mostly I just felt confusion.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of like, what is this?
I just thought it's fun to mention because it's, like I said, it's been pretty much...
Yeah,
we were never connected with it, and I've seen loads of people afterwards mention it. So who knows, we might still be wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the film that we saw first of last
Yes.
year's crop, because we actually saw that in like beginning of November 2019.
In like a preview screening.
And it is one of those films that I didn't think about for vast portions of last year.
Until people started just mentioning it. Like, I know it got mentioned in passing to us by other people.
Yeah.
Off the top of your head, just while we're talking about reviews that we did.
Old Guard, by the way, that's on Netflix, isn't
Yes.
it? For people who do want to catch that.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
While we're just talking about our reviews, literally, I didn't prep you for this one, but is a review last year that you really enjoyed that we did? Because I have one in my head.
A review that we did.
That I think was probably the most fun I've had reviewing a film.
That we
on
both
this
did.
podcast.
Is the
Yeah, for me. Like, it could be just you review.
I mean, I'm guessing it's one of the Netflix Christmas movies. No? Okay, that was just the one that I was looking at. No, I don't really know.
So yeah, just like I said, it's just an aside at the top of your head. Is a film review that you said last year we did, and you went, "Oh, I really enjoyed that review." Because for me, I loved reviewing Artemis Fowl with you.
Okay.
That was probably the most fun I've had reviewing something on this podcast.
Yeah, I remember afterwards you were kind of like, oh, that felt like the old days where we would just rag on a film.
Like, it was just a lot of fun. For a film that I really didn't like, but we had a lot of fun.
I mean, this is the thing, is that I think a lot of people will always say, like, oh, it's better to listen to a bad review of, or a review of a bad movie than it is to listen to a review of a good one, because with a good one, you're trying to be sincere, you're trying to be very honest about your opinion and sort of praise its qualities. Whereas with the bad reviews, you can kind of go, oh, well, I'll go in and just go in quite hard on it. But, you know, I don't think the same kind of... Like, so, for example, Fantasy Island, when you reviewed that, I don't remember you reviewing it that savagely in terms of the way you dissected a lot of Artemis Fowl. I mean, Artemis Fowl is just one of those ones where you kind of go, is there a way that this is ever good? And I really doubt it. It's one of those films where you just kind of look at it and go, I don't know if there's a version of this film that exists in any multiverse that is good. Because it was a hot mess. But yeah, okay, I'll side with you on that one. I would say that the Artemis Fowl one, we did come away from going, that was a fun review.
So, should we move on to another category?
Yeah. So, in fact, while we're talking about terrible films, should we be talking about films, otherwise forgettable films, with standout performances?
Yes.
Because this is something that we've talked about on numerous occasions over the years now, where a film is so bad that even a great performance can't revive it, or a film is forgettable, but there is a couple of good performances or one good performance in it that maybe makes it worth seeing.
Yeah.
The film that I've chosen is middle of the road.
I'm wondering whether you're going for the same film I've gone for, by the way.
It's not, because you haven't seen this film. But I've gone for... Oh, wait. Okay, there's a joke answer and then there's a correct answer. Of course, the joke answer is in The Lie, The Policeman.
I forgot about him. How do I always forget about him?
Or the pastor in Dolly Parton's Christmas on the Square. What I've actually gone for is Jack O'Connell in Jungleland.
Okay.
Because, I mean, look, boxing dramas...
what is Jungleland? I can't remember this.
Yeah, so it's the boxing drama that came out, I think it was sort of November last year, reviewed it last month. It's, two brothers going up against the odds in a bare-knuckle boxing world. So
I remember this one.
Jack O'Connell plays the boxer, and then his brother is played by Charlie Hunnam. Mm-hmm. And Charlie Hunnam, I think, is fine in it. I don't think he's particularly outstanding, but I think he's fine. Jack O'Connell, I mean, this is the problem, is that Jack O'Connell is always great, so you should always expect a good performance. But boxing dramas are just sort of so dime a dozen now that you get to the point where you're like, well, what are you telling me here that, your story isn't that different to any of the other stories that have been in these boxing dramas. So why does this one stand out?
Yeah.
You need to have something, because otherwise it just blends in with the rest of them. And it gets to the point where you just go, I don't know how many of these I have to watch before I just go, I'll never watch another one, because I think I've seen every different person in the world being in one of these. So many people have taken a run at it. But, Jack O'Connell is really great at just creating really well-rounded, and, even if the script isn't necessarily there to support it, I think his performances are always really good. And we've talked about, Money Monster wasn't perfect. It wasn't terrible either. That was a really straight down the middle film, I think. And yet he's by far the best thing in it, and he's there with, George Clooney and who is in that? Is it Julia Roberts?
Maybe. Yeah, I want to say yes.
Yeah. But, he's there giving it his all. And ever since I saw him in 71, I think he's just been outstanding in everything I've seen him in. And the shame of it is that I've talked about this on the podcast previously, I think, in that I just think that he's getting the wrong project. He's getting projects that just aren't getting acclaim. And after 71 did so well and was so highly acclaimed, I thought, okay, here we are. This is the birth of a new star. In the same way that George Mackay, we feel like, is on the cusp of becoming superstar. It just never really happened for Jack O'Connell yet in terms of just the exposure. And it might be a deliberate choice by him.
Yeah.
It might not be, but I think, Jungleland's another example of just a really good performance by someone who's, I don't think has ever turned in something that I've not liked, and yet deserves way more from the rest of the film. Mm-hmm. And there's only so many times you can do that before people just stop picking you, I think, which is a really sad thing. Mine's Jungleland.
My second choice, by the way, for this is either Hugh Grant or Colin Farrell in The Gentleman.
Okay,
both of them are fantastic in that film. But my actual pick, and this is one I thought you might have gone for as well, is Delroy Lindo in The Five Bloods.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because I think The Five Bloods is a fairly okay film. So it's the film that was basically about 5 Vietnam veterans going back to Vietnam to uncover some gold that they buried during their time there.
Yeah.
And it's about them kind of realising kind of the grip the Vietnam War still has on their lives now, and also the loss of a friend during that time.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of those films that was very mixed in tone of just, I didn't really get what it wanted to do, and at times it was fantastic, and at times it was bad. But the one shining light throughout the entire thing is, I think, Delroy Lindo puts in a performance of a lifetime. I think he's phenomenal in this film.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when I was looking through the films on my list for this, I'd put that higher up than something like Jungleland. So I didn't even look that far. I kind of, I just scrolled right past it because I was like, I want to get to something that's really forgettable. And I think Jungleland does that. Whereas I think you're right. I think, there are these moments of real brilliance in The Five Bloods. And I think the central performances, I think, are all good. But Delroy Lindo is sort of that key catalyst of everything is revolving around the power of that sort of gravitational pull of his performance.
He has this kind of like shine to him that like you can't help but watch him.
Yeah.
And like the kind of crescendo arc of his character, I think, is just absolutely heightened by the way he puts himself across.
Yeah.
I remember watching that film and coming out being like, that's a performance.
Yeah.
And it's a performance I hope we see recognised.
Yeah, I mean, if any year would have that recognised, you'd hope it would be this one, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And like I said, The Five Bloods is fine. It's absolutely fine. Like, I wanted to like it more than I did.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, it was a classic recent Spike Lee movie in that it wasn't as good as it could have been. Aside from Black Klansman, which I think is his best work in years.
Yeah.
That thing of just there are glimpses of what he is capable of doing, but then there's also a lot of stuff where you go, well, that's a bit of a missed opportunity, or that's not so great, and you feel like it slightly lets it down. And it's a shame, because I think if the film was consistently at the level that it achieves at some points, then we would have been talking about it in our sort of top tens.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it kind of falls short, and it's still worth checking out, I'd say. And if for nothing else, Delroy Lindo's performance is so good. Connective tissue here. Jonathan Majors is in both of those films. So he plays Delroy Lindo's son in The Five Bloods, and then he plays the sort of mob boss in Jungleland. So, I mean, he's got a big career ahead of him as well, and I think he's pretty good in both of those films.
He's going to be in a Marvel film, I believe.
Ant-Man and the Wasp. He's Kang the Conqueror.
Also, a little bit of a connective tissue from The Five Bloods is Chadwick Boseman's performance is great in that, but also it's phenomenal in Ma Rainey's. Like,
and again, it's a similar one where
I didn't really enjoy. But
him and Viola Davis are the reasons to watch Ma Rainey. Really,
the performances there are great.
Okay, what have we got next? Let's see. Okay, so shall we do a film that could be improved with one single change?
Yes.
What have you got?
Okay, so I don't know how much you're going to agree with this, but it was the first thing I thought, and I was like, I'm putting it down.
Okay.
So, the one simple change is a casting change. Like
mine is as well, but it's a film that you haven't seen, so...
Put somebody else in that role, and I think this film is already much better. Prom.
Yeah.
Replace James Corden. Maybe change Nicole Kidman, but we can live with that. But James Corden...
Put her in the film more.
For somebody who can actually live that experience. Because I think the biggest problem with Prom, and the main thing we spoke about, was the fact that performance is overblown and stereotyped. And having somebody who has had a lived experience of that kind of environment already makes that a much better film.
I think this is a really good pull. I think you're right, and it doesn't need to be, it needs to be this person in particular. It's just, you need to just...
It needs to not be... Because the problem is, there's a lot of talk about it being gay face and being this kind of like really kind of stereotyped, kind of flouncy, kind of almost like all the insults you got on the school playground style performance.
Yeah.
And that coming from somebody who hasn't lived the gay kind of experience...
Yeah, what it ends up doing is sort of negatively detracting from the story you're trying to tell with that character. Yeah, and it's something that we spoke quite, the review was only recently, so I won't go into it too much, but it was something that we did discuss at pretty great length when we were talking about it, the fact that Ryan Murphy has been historically so great for representation, and it just seems really odd that this is the one film where he's gone, oh, well, I'm not going to cast a gay actor in this role. What I'll do is I'll cast someone who's got some kind of presence. And I don't know whether that's just a case of, Netflix said, can you put someone else in it so it's got someone of real note to it?
Corden is a performer, and he is known for having great stage history. Like, he was great stage career, and he has got a good voice.
Yeah.
And this isn't me going, Corden can't sing and, he can't act. Like, I think, there have been times he can.
Yeah.
I think he has more misses than he has hits. But at the same time, if you replace that, there's actually a lot of emotion to that character.
Yeah.
And there's quite a hard-hitting story to him. Like, there's actually some kind of depths of despair and kind of loss and stuff like that in his life I don't think come across.
Yeah, and I think
you've got a character that is just...
I think you're right when you say that, well, basically, that performance then lowers the ceiling for where this film can hit.
Exactly.
And I think that's quite a dramatic lowering, because I think the film itself is probably fine.
Yeah, I didn't mind it.
But I think the problem casting has meant that it's dragged it down for me. Certainly, it's lower in my list than I think it would have been if he hadn't have been in that role. It becomes
the focus of the story. Like, it becomes the thing...
It overrides everything, doesn't it?
And if you just change that, then maybe the rest of it could have been seen as a package rather than being like, Prom is fine, but also, have you seen this casting?
Sure.
And every story I read about Prom always started with, hey, here's why this is problematic.
Yeah.
And then talks a little bit about the film. change that casting, you could have maybe changed the film.
When that becomes the narrative of all reviews,
absolutely,
it then means that your film is never going to be looked at as just the film.
You said you have one that's also fantastic.
Again, you haven't seen. I think I've chosen all films that you haven't seen, which is really handy. But it's Color Out of Space.
Okay.
Get rid of Nicolas Cage. The problem with doing a sort of cosmic horror story where people are driven insane by this bizarre color, if you've got Nicolas Cage in the film already kind of going full Nicolas Cage at the start of the film. Okay, so the reason... Okay, so if I compare Color Out of Space, which is a Lovecraft story, to a film that was inspired by Lovecraft, but not necessarily, but In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter, Sam Neill is the central character in that. Sam Neill is the perfect choice because he's very sort of straight-laced and very sort of, buttoned up in terms of his appearance right at the start of the film. And he's the kind of person who you can then see go on this journey. Nicolas Cage, you're there from the beginning going, this guy's insane.
Yeah.
It's the third minute of the movie. We haven't even seen the colour yet. So it's one of those just very quick casting changes where you go, put anyone else in that role who isn't just already 100%.
I think a similar thing happened in the film Mom and Dad, where when he's crazy, it's great. Like, his craziness matches what needs to be in the film.
But he is already a crazy dad.
If you start there and you're like, oh, my dad is already insane.
Yeah.
Then he has nowhere to go.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a case of just... If you're trying to explore what this cosmic power does to the human mind, don't get someone who clearly has no humanity left. Like, he's insane from the start, and that's the problem. And it means that your film fundamentally... And I think I would have liked Color Out of Space much more if it wasn't just like, well, this already crazy guy seems to maybe have got less crazy. I don't know.
Everyone else is going crazy, and he's there just like, oh, I feel sane. Like,
so it's a shame, I would say, because I think maybe it's just a case of you cannot cast him without having that additional baggage that comes along with him.
It's kind of what he's been doing lately, which is just...
And maybe even for like 20, 30, think back to Face Off, he is 100% in that film throughout.
He's become like almost a parody of himself.
In the same way that Johnny Depp did after Pirates of the Caribbean. He started playing all of these characters who just had an accent and an affectation. And then it was just, hang on, are you playing the character or are you playing Johnny Depp as this character? Whereas now it's a case with Nicolas Cage of, are you playing this character or are you playing this character as seen through the prism of Nicolas Cage?
A bit like Ryan Reynolds now.
Everything has that sort of Van Wilderism to it, and you kind of go, okay, but if you remove
I was thinking from Deadpool, and you're there like, no, Van Wilder.
I think he started the journey of Van Wilder, but if you remove that snarkiness, is he? There's probably a really great actor underneath Ryan Reynolds who's capable of doing stuff with a real depth to it, and things like The Voices was kind of interesting. Have you ever seen that?
No,
I think it's probably worth checking out. I'd be interested to rewatch it. But yeah, with someone like Ryan Reynolds, you kind of feel like if you get rid of some of that snarkiness, do you then see a depth of field to that performance, those performances that you didn't necessarily have previously? I think you're right. Nicolas Cage, for a long time now, has just been turning in performances where it's like, well, he's gone full Nicolas Cage. Even if you look at something like Con Air, which, he's supposed to play a grounded character who is essentially a superhero, basically, in that movie. But he is full Nicolas Cage in that movie as well. And I get it, he's trying to pose undercover as a prisoner. But, come on.
Should we move?
Yeah, let's move on. What else have we got?
So I gave a category just for you if you want to do this one.
Okay, yeah. So, scariest film I saw this year. Saint Maud. The thing is, I would be really tempted to say something else. I would be tempted to say, oh, okay, well, Host really scared me. But, of course, I did famously say it didn't really scare me. But I could have said something like Relic, and I could have... But or his house. But all of these films all shared something in common, which was I thought they were all really good. Certainly those three as the sort of key examples of really good horror movies this year really stuck out. Possessor also was terrific, but Saint Maud has stayed with me in the same way that Relic has. But I remember feeling just this sense, and I think a large part of it is due to the fact that this was the only horror film I think I saw this year on the big screen. Oh, other than Invisible Man. But it was the only, certainly as the first horror film I saw after lockdown in the cinema. And it's the last film I saw in the cinema as well. It's really, really stuck with me. And something like Possessor I saw at the London Film Festival on the virtual thing.
Yeah.
And I think, and same with Relic as well. And I think the problem is when you do that, you then maybe lose some of the impact of it in terms of just how scared you are, because you're there very aware that you're watching a laptop screen rather than sitting watching it 30 feet high or whatever. Saint Maud is just, it is a brilliant masterclass in horror filmmaking and being more than not the sum of its parts, because I think the sum of its parts is still amazing, because I think everything in it really works, but it really just comes together really well. And I think I had a conversation with my brother about this, who I saw it with, and he said, oh, the reason I can't have it in my sort of top 2 or 3 is that, and he talked about his house maybe being above it in terms of his list of the year. And I don't know actually where it ended up, but he was saying, oh, well, I think his house is maybe a more universal thing, whereas Saint Maud feels like a very personal story. And Saint Maud is clearly told from a very personal viewpoint, but I also feel like it has this universality to its themes of loneliness and sort of faith and lack of, or rediscovering faith. I think it still works on a general level. And it has the scariest final act, I think. It is just really, I don't know. I found it terrifying still in a really great way.
A question that I don't know whether you can answer or not is, what type of horror is it? Just for those people who are listening.
Okay, so I would say that a good way to view this is, if you were the kind of person who went to It Comes at Night expecting a flat-out sort of gore fest or sort of slasher movie or whatever, or monster movie, it's not for you. It's for the people who went to see It Comes at Night and still came out from it really impressed with what you saw. It is a mood piece horror. I think if you like... Well, this goes against it because Paul, my brother, famously doesn't like Robert Eggers films. But if you like The Witch and if you like The Lighthouse, I think this shares some of that DNA of looking at it from a very human perspective of psychologically, this is the process that this woman is going through.
So it's not an in-your-face kind of jump scare.
It's a very slow build. It's a mood piece horror more than it is anything else, but it's also a character study, and I think it's a really brilliant sort of exploration of loneliness. And I think for me, it's neck and neck really with Relic as in terms of just the best horror movies I've seen this year. Relic is so fucking good as well. But yeah, I would say that Saint Maud, if you are looking for something that's sort of jump scary, that feels more like it's The Nun or something like that, you're going to be disappointed. Whereas if you're someone who enjoys that sort of slow build horror and that sort of creeping dread, there's a payoff to it, and it's really terrifying. But yeah, I think Saint Maud is just, I mean, in terms of debut features as well, just one of the best I've seen.
And this is why I thought it would be nice to kind of, you are a horror guy.
What?
Like
I've been promoted.
You watch all of our horror films pretty much. And Relic, I will get around to at some point because you've basically told me.
I think you'll really get something out of Relic.
His House is another one that I just didn't get around to watching, and I will watch it at some point. If you want to know what my horror film of the year was, it's Invisible Man, because it's one of like 2 I watched, and Invisible Man played.
It's better than Black Box.
I think I said this on the review 2020. Like, it played my anxieties like a banjo.
I think,
so well put together.
Isn't it interesting though that when we saw Invisible Man in February, end of February, beginning of March? Yeah, because I'd just come back from LA when I'd seen it, and you had seen it while I was there. I think it's a film that we talked about a lot then, and kind of when pandemic hit, we kind of went, will that just win Best Picture now because nothing else is going to come out? And then obviously they changed all the rules, and but isn't it interesting that I think we're still talking about it in a way that we wouldn't normally have been talking. Certainly, okay, we look at the other Blumhouse release of that time, Fantasy Island. It really is the dichotomy of Blumhouse is you can have within 3 or 4 weeks of each other Fantasy Island and then The Invisible Man. And it's just like, it is night and day, the difference between the quality of those two.
Absolutely.
And I think Leigh Whannell is weirdly, for someone who I've not necessarily enjoyed all of his work, and we're a long way from Saw at this point, which was obviously his start, but isn't it interesting that he's making this kind of thing and clearly has a vision for how that film was made?
I think that's the important thing. The beautiful thing about Invisible Man is it's somebody who went, I know what I want to do with this story.
Yes.
And it might not be kind of what you expected, but it's kind of, it makes it almost realistic. Yeah. Like, there are moments in it that are, maybe a little bit more fantasy.
Yeah.
But there are definitely moments where you go, this almost seems real, and that's what's scary.
Yeah, they found a relatively decent way of sort of incorporating as many reality sort of aspects into it.
That first half of the film, had me properly questioning my own sanity. Did I see something there?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, am I just trying to find
something? It's a film that's going to benefit from rewatches as well, yeah.
Like, I watched it in the dark, and that was terrifying.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we move on?
Yes.
The last category I've got down here then.
I've got one more written.
Yeah, is film that you kind of wish had more eyes on it, more people had seen it. So, sort of an underrated or an underseen gem.
Yeah, something that I don't think enough people have talked about. I've seen definitely people talk about my one, but not enough. And I don't think enough people who are kind of maybe not reviewers, but people who are just
general audience goers. Or
the weird thing is, like, anyone has access to my one, but I don't think anyone really went near it.
Okay.
And the reason is because it's a documentary.
Yeah.
Which is Dick Johnson is Dead.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the best put together films of this year. I think it is really important. So Dick Johnson's Dead, or it was a documentary about a woman's father who was slowly succumbing to dementia, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And she filmed him over time, basically having these interviews with him, speaking to him as the journey went on. And it was intercut with these kind of little funny moments where basically they kept killing him for...
Yeah, these very sort of abstract, surreal death scenes that were, set up and staged in real streets or in an office or whatever, but were sort of filmed as this is the death of Dick Johnson. Yeah. But then you see that 5 or 6 different ways throughout the film.
And it's almost like this kind of thing of like, it almost leans into this kind of like, he could go in any way in any time, so let's appreciate the kind of time we have with him. But it is this story of, it's a very personal story of how dementia affects not only the person, but the people around it. But at the same time, it's a story that you feel part of. And there's a warmth to it, and there is heartbreak in there as well. And it was when we were talking on our review of the year, and we mentioned this, that I remembered one of my favourite scenes of this entire year was in this, which is there's a bit at Halloween, and it's all filmed.
It's a really
there,
good scene,
and there's just a moment in there that is just so beautiful and kind of tore me to pieces. And I was like, this is what filmmaking should be. Yeah, like, you should feel. And it really made me kind of go through the ringer. And I think it's one of those that, even if you've not had hands-on experience with anybody with dementia, you would still get something out of this. And I
Yeah.
think if you have, you really would see kind of what it's doing and what it's talking about, and you kind of it mirrors experiences of the past.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's on Netflix. Like, everyone has access to it. I saw some people reviewing it and being like, "This is great. This is amazing." But I don't think enough of a general movie going.
Yeah, I think
unless
unless you have a job or a hobby where this is what you do and you talk about films all the time, maybe you wouldn't have come across it in the same way. Or, you know, certainly from a general perspective, I don't think it's the kind of thing that popped up on Netflix and everyone went, "Oh, I'll add that to my list."
Honestly, the only reason I saw this is because you reviewed it and you made it sound so great. I was like, okay, I'll give this a go. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's on Netflix. I think is it a Netflix original? So
all my picks have been on Netflix, I think.
Oh, fair enough. Mine, everyone has to pay for mine. So my final one then for this, a film that I kind of wish more people had seen. This was due to it sort of having a weird release where I think it got released on about 20 screens in the UK, and it was for a week only, and then straight to premium VOD. The Wolf of Snow Hollow, which is Jim Cummings' new film. I think, you know, I'll always enjoy a film where they try and do something different. And even if it doesn't 100% pull it off, I respect the fact that you've tried to do something that's sort of interesting and unique. I think, so a brief summary of it is it's a werewolf movie. A small town is sort of attacked by a werewolf, and people start dying in these horrifying attacks. And the police department of this town then have to sort of deal with the fact that people are claiming that this is a werewolf and that, you know, no one's safe from it, and they need to find out who's killing these people because it seems to be happening every month when the moon is full. So everything is pointing towards it being a werewolf, but there is one cop who is basically having to say, like, it's not a werewolf. It can't be a werewolf. There is no such thing as werewolves. I think I think I'm just someone who has a genuine connection to Jim Cummings films. I think between this and Thunder Road from last year, there is a direct correlation of both of these films are ultimately very, very introspective films that look at humanity. And certainly Thunder Road is just a really spectacular sort of exploration of one person's portrayal of, experiences of life. But this film kind of feels like it's doing a bunch of different things because it is this weird throwback movie to the sort of films of the late 80s and the early 90s where you've got a sort of a budget werewolf sort of running around doing things. But then it's really well counterplayed with this sort of small town police force who are... You can tell that there's inspiration been taken from a lot of sort of how the cops behave in those sort of slasher movies of the 80s. But then also there's a slight sort of Twin Peaksiness to it in terms of the way that this sort of very dysfunctional, or Fargo as well. I think is probably a good example of. It's a slightly weird and idiosyncratic sort of bunch of individuals who make up this police force. Really good performances. I think Jim Cummings is someone who is very quickly becoming just this one-man band of just, I appreciate it's a collaborative process, but, he'll write, he'll star, he'll produce, he'll direct, and he's doing all of that here and doing it really well. And that's not to mention the fact that Robert Forster puts in a really good final, I think it's going to be his final performance maybe, who passed away 2019. But I think it's just one of those films that tries to do a couple of different things, and I think actually really succeeds in creating this weird sort of atmosphere of a sort of nostalgic look at those sort of horror movies, whilst also trying to do this thing about this guy who's still having to juggle his own personal life around the fact that he's also got to hunt down a werewolf, as it were. So I think, a film like that somehow manages to do both of those really well should be applauded and should be seen by more people. I just don't think anyone will have really seen it because it got a week release here and then was straight to DVD or, VOD.
It's another one that when I've seen mentioned is always mentioned positively.
Yeah, I think it's just, if you've got a slightly off-kilter sense of humour, it might be right up your alley. It's not a laugh riot, but there's some weird stuff in it that I think will really make you laugh if you're into that sort of thing. So I'd say, the same thing would have been said about Thunder Road last year, in that barely anyone would have seen that, but it was so good. I think, looking back on the year,
Can I mention one more before
of course
we kind of wrap up? That kind of fits 3 out of 4 of the categories that we spoke about today.
Okay.
The only one it doesn't fit in is the fact that I don't think I'm wrong on this film.
Okay.
But in a film that's been underseen,
could be improved by a
single change, and what was the third one?
Had a great performance.
So, Come As You Are.
Okay.
Is the film that is a road trip about 3 people with various disabilities trying to go on a road trip to get laid.
Yes.
That's the basic premise of it. And as a film, does really great stuff for kind of showing disabilities on screen in a way that normally is shied away from. And I think the performances in there are great. And it's a film that has heart and it's really well put together. But at the same time, is a film that should have been cast with characters who are disabled, characters who, are experiencing disability.
And this was something that was carried over from the original, wasn't it? Because this is a remake of a Dutch film, is it? Something like that? And they also did the same thing where they cast able-bodied actors.
Yeah, and with the description from the directors being like, we didn't have time to train up people with disabilities to be actors, but there are people out there who are already actors with disabilities.
Yeah, it's like, you don't have to train them up to... And they've been doing this for years.
My big problem was that big stumbling block really affects the film, because the film is fairly high in my list of films this year. I think the writing's really good. I think the actual performances from the people who are in it are good. I think the story takes you on a journey. It is setting at times, but it is real.
Yeah.
But you're missing something because you're not giving opportunity for this to be on screen without giving opportunity to people who would really benefit from it.
Yeah.
And it's because I was just looking at my list, being like, oh, is there any of us that I'd really like? I wish somebody else had looked at this, and I saw it, and I was like, I kind of wish people would see this, but I kind of wish you'd done something different.
Yeah.
I kind of wish you'd taken that jump and gone, okay, we're going to be giving these opportunities out there. And I kind of hope there are more films like that.
Of course.
Going forwards, which is, films that are shining a light on, people who don't get
certainly
that screen
underrepresented
time.
Stories, yeah. I think we talked about that last year with Peanut Butter Falcon, or 2019 with Peanut Butter Falcon, and just saying it's kind of heartwarming to see this, but at the same time, isn't it dreadfully sad that this isn't seen as just the norm, that this is seen as something where, oh, well, we should celebrate the fact that this has come around. Well, should we? Or should we say, why isn't this happening more often?
It shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't go, oh, it's great to see this. Because
it shouldn't have to be that they've gone out and written this film just to give Zach Gottsagen this part and do this story. It should be that there are these stories out there already, and yet here we are kind of saying the same thing a year on. Nothing really changes, but I suppose we'll see in the sort of long term. Anything else you want to mention?
No, just thought I'd mention that one.
Okay.
I saw it on my list.
No worries. Okay, well, I think that's it.
Yeah, you started saying something and I really cut you off. And
it's just, there's been some films and they've been good films. Well, that's where we're ending. I mean, that's probably the last time we'll probably go back and mention all of the stuff from, other than when it comes to the Oscars stuff. Oh, God.
But that's not April, it's fine.
Yeah, we've got months until then. But this was sort of the final wrap-up of last year's stuff.
We've done, like I said, we did it a few years ago, and this year we went, well, why don't we, after the kind of dust has settled from best of the year, just have a little chat about some other films that, maybe are ones that we didn't talk about often throughout the year. Some of these, you would have heard us, like, I'm pretty sure St. Maud has been brought up multiple times.
On every podcast since I saw it.
And, there are films like that, but, there are some that we probably didn't talk about enough.
Yeah.
And also, it's nice to kind of go, what films are doing stuff right, but actually probably could reach another level if they'd done something differently. But yeah, that's where we'll leave it, guys. As ever, you can find us on all of the social medias, basically.
Yeah.
With Dinosaur Man Podcast or at DinosaurMan15 on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for joining these as ever for the theme song.
It was good still. It's still the same one.
Give the podcast a subscribe if you want.
Yeah, subscribe, review us, tell your friends. If you're Tony Hawk, retweet us, you ungrateful bastard.
If you're Tony Hawk, go catch that ollie.
You know what? Do a sick flip and then do a 360 spin out.
Oh, do that.
I don't know what
a
spin
casual
out is.
And jump over a gap or something.
If you're Tony Hawk, then enter the code that makes you Darth Maul. Do you remember that from one of them? You could be Darth Maul.
Thank you, Alex, for being the host.
You're welcome. Thank you for being the host.
It's perfectly fine. And guys, until next...
Imagine if I wasn't that thankful for you being the host.
Until next time, do a kickflip.
Sick kickflip. 360 points.
Whoa, you got 10,000 points and then you fell off your board and lost them all.
Oh no, you failed to unlock New Orleans.
So guys, is that real big fish I hear?
That's right. It's the Mario Kart Invincibility Star, but this time played on a trumpet in Real Big Fish.
Bye.